Hello, readers by eyes and by ears. This is Marty Chen, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, we are diving back into the disabled tyrant's beloved pet fish, also known as 残疾暴君的掌心鱼宠, by that's a lot to say. I don't think I'll say it every intro. Anyway, by Xue Shan Fei Hu, and we're covering chapters 5 through 8 today, so I hope you all enjoy. Chapter 5. The fish was petted. Prince Jing was still watching the fish intently when Wang Xi handed him both boxes of fish food. Wang Xi's eyes were filled with anticipation. Having served Prince Jing for many years, Wang Xi knew exactly what the master wanted without the prince having to say a single word. Smiling, he said sincerely, "Your Highness, this old servant has a few things to take care of, but the fish still seems to be hungry. Could you help me feed the fish?" Mu Tianchi paused for a second, surprised. Wang Xi pushed the boxes toward him and continued very seriously. "There are two kinds of feed. The red ones taste like fish-flavored shredded pork, and the green one is mushroom and greens. The servant thinks the little carp seems to prefer the red one." Mu Tianchi couldn't help but agree. The little carp did seem to have a little more life when it ate the red feed. Mu Tianchi silently accepted the red feed box. Wang Xi smiled until his eyes looked like two crescent moons. After reminding Prince Jing not to overfeed the fish, he made up some excuse and left the two of them alone. Mu Tianchi hesitated, holding the box of fish feed. After all, he was treading in unfamiliar waters here. Down below, Li Yu waited and waited. But when it didn't seem like Wang Xi was going to feed him anymore, the hungry little carp swam up to the water surface, waiting expectantly. Li Yu and Prince Jing, fish and human, stared into each other's eyes. Li Yu was startled. He hadn't expected to see Prince Jing. Then he remembered he was merely a fish. It didn't matter how long he stared at Prince Jing, the prince probably wouldn't notice. What was Prince Jing about to do? Li Yu couldn't figure it out. The tall, imposing youth couldn't speak, always keeping his thoughts hidden behind those dark, fathomless eyes. Mu Tianchi stood in front of the tank for a full 10 minutes before he threw a handful of red pellets into the water with a little too much force, nearly pelting Li Yu with the torrential downpour of fish food. Li Yu gaped at Prince Jing in shock. He almost couldn't believe it. By the time he realized what had happened, his body had already instinctively launched itself at the fish food Prince Jing had tossed in. Turning in a beautiful curve in the water, the little carp carefully held the food in his mouth. In his chest, his heart went pit-to-pat. Not only had the tyrant saved him, he had even personally fed him. As soon as he swallowed the fish food, the system, which had been silent up until now, suddenly came to life. "Congratulations, user. You have completed the second part of the Mo Pet System main quest, Tyrant's Priceless Pet Fish. Interact with the Tyrant. Congratulations. You will now receive the corresponding reward." Li Yu could have burst into tears. So this was what interacting meant. In one big gulp, he devoured the last of the food that Prince Jing had tossed in. Belly full and fit to bursting, Li Yu drifted down to lie on the bed of snowy white rocks to take a quick nap. Anyone, human or fish, would feel sleepy after eating a full meal. Now that the second task was taken care of, Li Yu didn't think it would be too late if he waited to collect his reward, and he took a little nap first. Thankfully, although the experience had been frightening, nothing dangerous had happened. Li Yu couldn't fall asleep wherever he wanted when he had been a human, but he had no such problem now. As a fish, he could sleep however he wanted, upright or lying down. Very soon, Li Yu fell into the embrace of a dream. Recalling what Wang Xi had said, Prince Jing glanced at the little carp, then tapped on the tank with 2 fingers. Li Yu, who had been teetering on the precipice of sleep, was jolted awake by the sound. "What is it? I want to sleep. Some people have injuries to recover from." If it hadn't been for the quests, Li Yu wouldn't have to have anything to do with this tyrant at all. Having noticed that the fish was still lying limply on the rock, Prince Jing extended a hand. Li Yu, who was attempting to fall back asleep, felt the water move. "What's happening?" Li Yu was immediately wide awake, his terror chasing away the notions of sleep. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Prince Jing's hand reaching into the tank. Li Yu flinched, fighting the urge to swish his tail. He was still injured, for one thing, so moving his tail hurt. And secondly, daring to swish his tail in Prince Jing's face would only mean one thing: a dead fish. Li Yu felt like his heart was strapped into a roller coaster, but to his surprise, Prince Jing did not immediately grab him. Instead, he nudged him lightly off the bed of snowy white rock. Did Prince Jing not want him to go to sleep? Li Yu was utterly confused as Prince Jing's finger pushed him forward. Prodded by the prince's finger, Li Yu swam around nearly the entirety of the tank. He didn't know what Prince Jing wanted. Fear slowly crept over his heart. But after a while, he realized the prince seemed perfectly content with nudging him around and didn't seem to want to do anything else. Li Yu's pulse gradually calmed down. Occasionally, he'd give a few lazy swipes of his fins as a show of cooperation. Inevitably, his soft, tender fin would brush against Prince Jing's finger. Mu Tianchi froze. His stare drilled holes into the insolent fish, who was completely unaware of what it had just done. If a person had dared to be so impudent, Prince Jing would have them torn limb from limb without question. But this was a fish, not a person. There was no need to be so harsh. Prince Jing's defenses were lowered, and he smirked, the corner of his lips lifting mischievously. Li Yu was splashing around in the water with his fins when the tip of his tail felt hot. Immediately, he felt an unnerving sensation emanating from back there. He turned his head to look. The tyrant's expression was impassive as always, but his hand, the same hand that would kill without hesitation, what was it doing? Ow! Don't curl my tail around your finger. My private area is right there. It tickles. Don't just touch wherever you want. Hey! The little carp's tail trembled violently. Help! He didn't think the tyrant would pet a fish. With Prince Jing pushing him along, Li Yu made several laps around the tank and steadily felt more and more energetic. At last, the prince finally stopped and let him go. Li Yu swam by himself for a while and soon realized his stomach no longer felt bloated. Was Prince Jing forcing him to swim to give him a chance to digest the enormous meal he had just eaten? There's no way, right? He thought, amused. He was pretty sure Prince Jing wasn't the kind of person who'd look out for a little animal. Li Yu added this incident to his collection of other unsolved mysteries, where it joined Prince Jing in saving his injured and unconscious self. Prince Jing raised his eyebrows slightly as he realized his sleeve had gotten wet. Li Yu thought Prince Jing would change immediately. After all, he was a prince, accustomed to a life of luxuries and riches. There was no way he'd allow himself to wear dirtied clothes, even if it was just a wet sleeve. Prince Jing left shortly after, just as Li Yu expected. Li Yu could no longer see his face peering at him from above the tank. But, oddly enough, Li Yu didn't hear the sound of a door opening and closing. What kind of master would change by himself? Servants were always at their beck and call to help with things like that. Although Prince Jing couldn't speak, he could still open the door and order for someone outside to wait on him. Li Yu waited and waited, but he didn't hear anything. After the nap he'd taken, his tail didn't throb as much, and he felt a lot better. It seemed like fish recovered faster than humans. Either that, or it was because he had the system. Li Yu decided to try using his tail again. Unless Prince Jing walked over himself, it was practically impossible to see the prince from Li Yu's position inside the fish tank. Li Yu wanted to confirm that the prince wasn't in the room anymore before collecting his reward from the moped system, just in case the prince wanted to play with him again, only to find an unconscious fish. Li Yu tested his tail, swishing it back and forth a few times. It really didn't hurt anymore. He summoned every bit of power he had and, with a swoosh, managed to launch himself high into the air. Before his leap of faith, Li Yu had already mentally prepared himself to take a good look at the world outside of his tank. The room was just as he imagined, ornate and magnificent, befitting a prince. There's Prince Jing! Oh, he's still in the room! The moment he leapt into the air, he spotted Prince Jing's figure standing only a few meters away. His black robes had yet to be fastened completely, so Li Yu had an unobstructed view of the smooth line of his muscles. Dark eyes gazed toward the little carp, shocked and stunned. For a moment, man and fish stared at each other. Oh no! How did he manage to catch Prince Jing in such a state of undress? He thought he would have finished changing by now. In addition to overestimating how quickly Prince Jing would get changed, Li Yu must have been confused and underestimated the complexity of historical clothing. Now it looked like he was some pervert spying on a beautiful man. Li Yu quickly took it all in, everything he was supposed to see, as well as everything he wasn't. His face burning, he twisted his body and dove back into the fish tank with a little splash. Why didn't the Prince Jing hide behind something if he was going to change? All right, fine. There was only a fish in the room with him. There was no need for him to hide anything. Li Yu darted under his leaf blanket as soon as he heard Prince Jing's footsteps approaching. Prince Jing may not have realized Li Yu had been looking at him, but he wasn't blind. He definitely would have noticed the fish jumping straight out of a tank, right? The prince definitely noticed. Li Yu lay there, heart in his throat, trying his best to pretend he was a normal fish. By now, Prince Jing had already arrived at the tank. Once again, he felt the uneasy sensation of the prince's piercing gaze on him. It felt like there was someone pointing a blade at his back. Li Yu discreetly turned around so that his tail was facing Prince Jing in an effort to cover up what he just did. Your Highness! Your Highness! Before Prince Jing could do anything, Wang Xi's anxious call came from outside. Li Yu let out a sigh of relief. Prince Jing fastened his jade button and took one last long look at the suspicious little fish. Then he strolled to the door and pulled it open. Wang Xi greeted him respectfully. Your Highness, the Emperor has sent someone. The Emperor was Prince Jing's father. The prince's expression turned serious, and he followed Wang Xi out to accept the imperial edict. Prince Jing was finally gone. Li Yu was delighted, but he stayed as still as a statue, pretending he didn't understand anything that was happening outside his fish tank. After the sound of footsteps faded into the distance, he swam to a quiet corner of the fish tank and quickly entered the system. The second part of the priceless pet fish quest was complete, which meant he could finally collect his reward of inventory space. And while he was at it, he also had to take a look at what the third step was. At this rate, he'd surely be turning back into a human any day now. Li Yu was very pleased with himself. He had just entered the system when a prompt popped up asking him if he would like to check out his inventory. Li Yu selected yes, overjoyed, and his inventory immediately opened up before his eyes, giving him a clear view of the inside. All Li Yu's praise caught in his throat as soon as he laid eyes on it. He thought his inventory would at least be the size of a storage room, but this was about the size of an adult's palm. No way! What's the point of having such a tiny space? So stingy. The system replied, since the user thinks the space is too small, would you like to give up your reward? Li Yu had almost forgotten the system could read his thoughts and shook his head hurriedly. No, it's better than nothing. There is currently only one inventory slot, the system informed him. Side quests can increase inventory slots. That's more like it, as long as I can get more. But this was all the space he had for now. What could he put in it? At most, he could probably fit 1 or 2 things in there. Despite having only been a fish for a few hours, Li Yu had been entertaining a lot of secret daydreams about this space. He had envisioned being able to store an enormous pile of fish feed, a bunch of medicine for his injuries, or even a large tank of fresh water for emergencies. That way, he could be a rich and carefree fish. But there were 2 problems. First, he hadn't managed to acquire any of those things, and second, it turned out he only had a tiny amount of space. For a moment, he was at a loss for what he could even do with the little resources he had. Meanwhile, Prince Jing had stepped out to receive an imperial edict, but who knew when he'd be back? He didn't have much time, so he just had to accept the space now and figure it out later. A ray of light shot out from the inventory, landing somewhere near Li Yu's left fin. When he took a look after the light had faded, he realized one of the scales beneath his fin had changed into the color of jade. Chapter 6. The Fish Swimming at the Bottom of the Bowl. The system gave Li Yu a tip. You don't need to enter the system first if you want to use the inventory. Use the shortcut. You can tap the jade scale 3 times. You can put anything within your field of vision inside, so long as it fits, using just your thoughts. The system continued talking. Li Yu smiled. As limited as the inventory space was, its method of usage was pretty cool. Not too shabby. He went to check on the main quest in the system. Just as he thought, the second task, Priceless Pet Fish, was now completed. The third task, which had previously been hidden away, was now revealed. The third task, Get Along with the Tyrant. Time limit, 3 days. Li Yu was speechless. Getting along with the Tyrant, interacting with the Tyrant. Didn't this system know anything else? Not to mention, the bar for interacting had already been so high. He hadn't been able to do it alone, and he needed Prince Jing to participate as well. So what on earth did getting along with entail? And there was a fucking time limit too? What was he going to do if he didn't complete it before time ran out? Exceeding the time limit counts as a failure. The user will become fish bones and fish... All right, enough! I got it! I just have to complete the task within 3 days, right? Can I at least rest today and start tomorrow? Sorry, the timer started from the moment you completed the second task. What? Li Yu took a closer look and realized it was right. Right next to the task was a small countdown, seconds ticking down slowly. This fucking system! Why didn't it let him know the timer had already started? What if he had slept for 3 days? So time still passed while he was in the system. Li Yu couldn't waste any more of it. He quickly exited and came back to the real world, arriving just in time to hear Wang Xi's voice. It turned out that while he was accepting his reward, Prince Jing and Wang Xi had already returned, and Wang Xi had spoken for a while. Luckily, the prince hadn't come over to visit Li Yu. He hurriedly swam around a little, shaking himself out of his dazed stupor to prove he was still very much alive. Pressing against one side of the tank to listen, he could faintly hear Wang Xi's muffled voice. "Why did the emperor call your highness to Tianjin Palace so suddenly?" the eunuch asked. "This old servant heard the emperor had visited Zhongshui Palace, so I thought the noble consort must have said something to him. After all, that white cat is the noble consort's beloved pet." Something seemed to occur to Prince Jing. A mocking smile curled his lips. "This servant didn't mean anything else by that," said Wang Xi hastily. "Of course, your highness wouldn't care for such things, but you do, at the very least, have to show some respect to the emperor. I'll accompany you and explain things clearly to him. I refuse to believe the noble consort can conceal the truth." When Prince Jing showed no interaction, Wang Xi continued, "Then I'll follow your highness." Mu Tianchu thought about it for a while before reaching over and blocking Wang Xi's way. He shook his head. Wang Xi froze. "Your highness doesn't want this servant to come this time?" As Prince Jing's personal servant, Wang Xi had taken care of the prince since he was a child. He could tell what the prince wanted just from a single glance. If the prince wanted to speak, Wang Xi was almost always able to say exactly what the prince wanted. The sudden summons of Prince Jing to Tianjin Palace led Wang Xi to guess the noble consort had probably hinted something to the emperor. Without Wang Xi there by his side, wasn't the prince doomed to take the fall? Prince Jing's dark eyes flicked to the top of his head expressionlessly. Wang Xi understood at once. "The emperor ordered your highness to go alone? You're not allowed to bring anyone with you?" Prince Jing nodded. Wang Xi was speechless. The emperor summoned Prince Jing, yet wouldn't allow him to speak. What was the meaning of this? The worst-case scenario would be if, after years of Zhongshui Palace exerting its influence, the emperor turned his affections away from his highness and onto the second prince. Wang Xi's eyes immediately burned red. "No, this old servant will follow your highness, even if it means my death." Prince Jing looked at his sorrowful face and hesitated a moment before tapping his shoulder lightly. Deliberately going against the emperor's wishes would only give the other side an advantage. Besides, Prince Jing didn't think a mere noble consort could do anything to him. "Then what does your highness plan to do?" Wang Xi sniffled. Prince Jing's distant gaze landed on the porcelain fish tank that stood behind Wang Xi. "Your highness wants to..." Wang Xi was shocked. He couldn't mean... The way Prince Jing held himself was calm and relaxed, an easy grace about him, the very picture of confidence. Wang Xi gritted his teeth. "Since your highness has already made his decision, the servant will obey and go prepare." Li Yu heard everything. The noble consort wanted to make things difficult for Prince Jing, and Wang Xi was discussing a plan of action with the prince. But Li Yu wasn't worried about Prince Jing at all. In the book, even though the noble consort seemed to have the emperor's favor, she didn't end up living very long. Li Yu figured this wasn't a big deal since there wasn't a detailed passage about this particular situation in the book. Nothing major was going to happen. Otherwise, how would Prince Jing ascend to the throne? Prince Jing was the kind of person who held grudges, an eye for an eye. If the noble consort really dared to try something, she wouldn't be reaping the rewards. She would be suffering the consequences. Anyway, as far as Li Yu was concerned, Prince Jing seeing the emperor was none of his business. He was a fish. All he had to do was wait quietly in his tank for the prince to come back before continuing with his task. While the 3-day time limit wasn't very long, it wasn't too bad either. He had completed his first 2 tasks entirely by chance, so perhaps it would be the same for this one. To his surprise, though, he watched Wang Xi rummage through the prince's chests and shelves, where he procured a little jade bowl. He approached the fish tank with an ominous look on his face. Li Yu tensed. "Wait, stop! What are you doing?" Li Yu screamed. Wang Xi, sleeves rolled up, quickly snatched Li Yu and deposited him in the jade bowl. The jade bowl was much too cramped, and the water it held was very shallow. There was barely space for Li Yu, who was forced to curl up into a circle to fit inside. He couldn't even swim normally, let alone roll around. If he exerted even just a tiny bit of force, he would surface from the water. It wasn't very safe. Li Yu curled around himself pitifully. Wang Xi murmured to him, "Little one, you'll have to bear with this for a while, since His Highness has decided to take you with him. Be good and don't embarrass him." Holy fucking shit! What was Wang Xi saying? Was Prince Jing okay? A man who couldn't speak bringing a fish that also couldn't speak? Li Yu didn't want to see any emperors or noble consorts. Knowing that Prince Jing was a noble prince and that he had the rest of the plot line ahead of him, Li Yu didn't think the emperor would do anything to his son. But Li Yu, on the other hand, was an entirely different matter. He was just a fish. If the emperor didn't like him, he could easily throw him away or roast him. "Wake up!" It wasn't up to Li Yu to decide where he went. With this trip, the fate of his fish life was up in the air. He had to come up with a contingency plan, and fast. There was still 1 spot in his inventory. Li Yu took a deep breath. While Wang Xi was distracted, he frantically tapped on his scale, thinking, "Let me save some clean water. I want water." He could survive as long as he had enough water, unless the emperor decided to cut off his fish head. Although there was water inside the jade bowl he was in right now, it was much too shallow to feel safe. If the person holding the bowl had shaky hands, he was fucked. He wasn't going to leave his life into some stranger's hands. He was going to save himself by saving some water. Li Yu hadn't put anything in his inventory yet. He definitely didn't expect it to come into use so quickly. He had only heard the system explain its application once, so he was purely relying on luck. Good thing he had a pretty good memory and remembered most of what the system had said. Instantly, the water in the porcelain tank became shallower, while Li Yu's inventory filled with water. "I have water!" Satisfied, Li Yu put away his inventory. Wang Xi called a group of servants into the room. They were all busy with their own tasks, so no one noticed the volume of the water changing inside the porcelain fish tank. Since Prince Jing had decided to take the little carp to see the emperor, Wang Xi had to make sure everything was taken care of. He prepared several small jade bowls of around the same size and various changes of clothing, all of which had to be taken along with the prince as a precaution. Wang Xi may not have been able to go with the prince to see the emperor, but the least he could do was take care of Prince Jing on the way there. Prince Jing gestured, indicating that he would hold the little carp who was about to meet the emperor. Wang Xi handed the bowl over respectfully, and Prince Jing glanced inside. The bowl was quite small, so the fish couldn't even fully stretch out inside. Wang Xi said there was nothing they could do about that. It wasn't like they could take a large bowl to see the emperor. That would stick out like a sore thumb. The little carp might have been more comfortable, but what would the emperor think? Prince Jing didn't care what the emperor would think. The bowl was too cramped. He shot Wang Xi a judgmental glare. Wang Xi thought his eyes were playing tricks on him and rubbed his eyes hard. "Your Highness, you're going to see the emperor. It's best if you take this jade bowl." Prince Jing sidestepped around him and pointed at a different bowl that had been taken out during Wang Xi's search for the jade bowl. This bowl was huge, with delicate ripples of water painted on the side. It was fully large enough to hold a pot of soup. Wang Xi's jaw dropped. Prince Jing was a stubborn man. Whatever he wanted, he was going to get. The large bowl was quickly brought over. Glancing briefly at Wang Xi, Prince Jing poured the little carp along with the water into the large bowl himself. Then he filled it up with more water. Li Yu was suddenly freed from the confines of the jade bowl. What happened? Why did it change again? But this new bowl was so much cooler. He liked it. Li Yu demonstrated his fishiness to the extreme, swimming and jumping around in his new domain. Since Prince Jing had moved him into a larger bowl, he had to amend his impression of the prince. Perhaps tyrants were, on occasion, good at taking care of their pets. Seeing how delighted the fish was, Prince Jing's lips twitched a little. After a second's thought, he brought out the box of red fish feed. He carefully shook out a few pieces into the bowl, in case this fish became hungry in its overexcitement as they made their way to the palace. Li Yu couldn't be more grateful, completely unaware that from afar, between the large bowl and the floating red pellets, he looked like a large bowl of goji fish soup. With one hand supporting the bowl on the bottom, Prince Jing covered the top with the other, in case the fish got too lively and jumped out. Even though he wasn't touching him directly, Li Yu could still feel the heat from his palm. It was warm and unexpectedly cozy. Li Yu had originally had doubts about whether this person was reliable, but if the prince protected him like this, it should be safe, right? The little carp's anxious heart gradually calmed until it settled down to the rhythm of Prince Jing's footsteps. Chapter 7. The Fish Meets the Emperor. Prince Jing brought Li Yu to Qianqing Palace. As they made their way over, the system, which had been silent this whole time, suddenly spoke to Li Yu. "The prerequisites have been met for the side quest, Clear Bright Pearl. Would the user like to begin the quest?" What was going on? He hadn't gotten along with Prince Jing yet, but now there was another quest? And a side quest too? He couldn't glean anything from just its name, though. Li Yu didn't want to overcomplicate things by having to worry about a side quest and the main quest at the same time. He'd be overthinking his poor fish brain. But out of curiosity, he still asked about the reward. The system replied, "The reward for the quest is a temporary transformation medicine, allowing the user to return to human form for a short period of time. The effects will last 2 hours. There will not be any penalty for failing the side quest." A medicine that could turn him back into a human? Why wasn't this brought up before? Even if it only lasted 2 hours, couldn't he just do the quest a couple more times, receive the reward over and over, and use them one after the other? Then he could stay human forever. The reward can only be claimed once. The system mercilessly reminded him as it witnessed his naive stupidity. Fine, I already knew you were a fish scamming system. He absolutely had to do this side quest. He had nothing to lose if he failed. If he had the medicine to transform, he could pick a suitable day to eat a ton of human food, talk a lot, and go anywhere he wanted to. Liu was originally human, but it wasn't until he became a fish that he appreciated how freeing and delightful it was to be a human. It would only be a short couple of hours, but getting to re-experience being human for even that amount of time was simply too alluring. It's just one more task. I'll do it. The quest called Clear Bright Pearl consisted of only a single line: obtain 1 luminous pearl. The stupid system's quests had always been vague in its instructions, but Liu was already used to it. He had no idea what a luminous pearl could possibly have to do with him, a fish. The system had previously explained that side quests could only be activated after the corresponding prerequisites had been fulfilled. Seeing how this side quest became active while Prince Jing was taking him to Qianqing Palace, it must have something to do with seeing the emperor. So, it didn't seem like he'd need to make any detours. Despite being royalty, Prince Jing didn't like to ride in a palanquin. Holding the little carp, with Wangxi trailing behind, he made his way to Qianqing Palace at a leisurely stroll. The head eunuch, Luo Yueshang, had already been waiting in front of the doors to Qianqing Palace for some time, and as soon as he saw Prince Jing, he rushed forward to greet him, bowed, and escorted him inside. Wangxi couldn't go in, so all he could do was wait anxiously outside the palace. They had finally arrived. Liu swam to the water surface, taking in the view of Qianqing Palace. As expected of the emperor's quarters, it was a majestic and extravagant structure filled with all sorts of rare and precious furnishings. The scent of sandalwood wafted by. Liu was utterly mesmerized. As magnificent as the room was, though, there was no fish tank in sight. Liu much preferred the quarters with the porcelain fish tank. It was only because of this excursion that he discovered Prince Jing was keeping him in Jingtai Hall. Even after the title of Prince was bestowed on him and he left the palace, Jingtai Hall, where Prince Jing had grown up, was still reserved for him. It truly was Prince Jing's territory. Liu was quietly proud of himself for managing to get into the tyrant's lair without much effort. He scanned his surroundings, but to his dismay, he didn't spot any luminous pearls. Liu had hoped the system would give him some hints, especially since the side quest had come out of nowhere. But there hadn't been another peep from the stupid system since it announced the side quest. Liu had to set both the main and side quests aside for the time being. Without any leads, all he could do was leave it up to fate. Seeing the emperor was more important right now. In the book, the emperor had quite a backstory with Prince Jing. In the original story, Prince Jing's mother, Emperor Xiaohui, had already been in ill health before she gave birth to the prince. After he was born, she couldn't bear the fact that her son was mute, and she passed away shortly afterward. The emperor deeply loved and respected Empress Xiaohui, so his feelings for his son had always been complicated, and he never grew very close to him. This was especially clear after Prince Jing turned 16, when the emperor ordered him to move out of the palace and into his own manor. All the other princes had only received their respective manors after they were married, but it didn't seem to matter to the emperor that Prince Jing remained unmarried to this day. As such, many people believe Prince Jing was unwanted and unloved. Liu was not one of those many people. The reason the emperor was so distant from Prince Jing wasn't because he didn't care for him, but because he sought to protect him. As Empress Xiaohui's son, Prince Jing had a much higher status than most. But no matter how noble he was, his muteness prevented him from inheriting the throne. Although the emperor had no desire to foster a close relationship with Prince Jing due to his wife's death, this was still his cherished wife's flesh and blood. Ordering him to move into his own manor early was the emperor's way of protecting his son. Ultimately, the emperor hoped this son would be able to live a peaceful life. All else aside, Prince Jing wasn't really the tolerant type. When he was a child and the other young princes taunted him for being mute, Prince Jing would just roll up his sleeves and beat them up. After the emperor found out, everyone was punished. But he also privately warned the other princes to be kinder to Prince Jing. With Prince Jing's inability to speak, his education was a challenge too. But the emperor specially appointed a strict teacher who had experience teaching mute and deaf students. The emperor never voiced his love for Prince Jing, but his actions spoke for him. Li Yu, therefore, was not at all worried about this trip. In the main hall of Qianqing Palace, the emperor sat on the throne carved with intricate flying dragons draped in bright yellow imperial robes. He nodded slightly when Prince Jing entered. "Tianshi, you've arrived." Prince Jing set the large bowl that held the little carp on the table off to the side and bowed seriously. The emperor beckoned him to stand up, smiling. As he looked at his son from a distance, he noted that Prince Jing was just as cold and quiet as always. Naturally, the emperor's gaze fell on the large bowl Prince Jing had brought. In the emperor's experience, bowls generally held soup. If someone came into Qianqing Palace with a bowl, they were usually there to present the soup to him. Assuming that Prince Jing knew what he had done wrong and had brought an offering of soup to apologize, the emperor chuckled. "How considerate of you." The misunderstood Prince Jing wasn't sure how to respond. Of his sons, the emperor rarely tried to get closer to this one. He felt his heart warming at the sight of the prince trying to please him. He immediately ordered Luo Zhuisheng to bring forward the prince's soup. Prince Jing couldn't speak. There was nothing he could do to stop Luo Gonggong in time, and the head eunuch nimbly picked up the large bowl before he could make his objection clear. Another eunuch waiting on the side handed over a silver needle. At first glance, the soup looked like goji fish soup. Needle in hand, Luo Gonggong was about to test it for poison like usual when he made eye contact with a lively little carp that had poked its head out of the water to watch all the commotion. Luo Gonggong was so alarmed that he nearly dropped the bowl. "Hi-yo! Prince Jing, what did you bring?" Equally startled by Luo Gonggong's sudden appearance, Li Yu immediately sank to the bottom of the bowl. "It's alive!" Luo Gonggong realized with a start. This wasn't fish soup. What exactly did Prince Jing bring? The emperor was too far away to see, but Luo Gonggong's exclamation made him curious. While Luo Gonggong struggled to think of how to answer, Prince Jing got up, approached Luo Gonggong, and took the bowl back. All without saying a single word. The emperor looked on in befuddlement. Prince Jing proceeded to bring the large bowl before the emperor himself, but he didn't look like he had any intention of handing it over. His hands remained clamped around the bowl. The large bowl, with its water ripple patterns, held a large volume of water. Swimming inside it was a small, palm-sized carp. The emperor paused. "Prince Jing, what is the meaning of this?" Mu Tianshi smiled as he reached a finger into the water, swirling it gently. Li Yu had managed to steal a glance at the emperor from within the water and saw a middle-aged man with a square face and a short mustache. It was fortunate that Prince Jing's other features were more like Empress Xiaohui's, Li Yu thought, and that he only shared his eyes with his father. If he looked more like the emperor, it would have been a blow to his good looks. Perhaps because he'd sensed Li Yu's criticism, the prince suddenly dipped his hand into the water. Li Yu was at a loss for what to do. He realized after a few seconds that the prince was playing with him. But they were standing before the emperor right now. What was the prince trying to do? Ever since Prince Jing had switched out his bowl, Li Yu knew the prince wasn't planning on giving him to the emperor. When it came to presenting gifts to the emperor, looks were paramount. Of course, a small, dainty jade bowl would be more suited to the ruler's tastes, but since the prince had passed on the jade bowl, it was clear he had no plans on using him to try to please the emperor. In that case, why did the prince bring him to see the emperor? Why play with him in front of the emperor? Oh well, who cared? If the master wanted to play with his pet, it was the pet's duty to respond. Li Yu shoved down his embarrassment. This wasn't the first or second time he had to act cute for Prince Jing. He swam, stopping in between the prince's fingers. After hesitating for a moment, Li Yu nuzzled his fish mouth against Prince Jing's finger affectionately. Whoa, there was the smell of fish food, the mouth-watering red kind. His movements were initially a little stiff, but as time went on, he began willingly chasing after the other man's finger. As Prince Jing looked down at the little carp swimming happily in the bowl, a light shone faintly in his eyes. The emperor almost thought he was seeing things. Prince Jing had always been cold and harsh, keeping his emotions under tight lock and key. And yet here he was, playing with the fish in a way that could only be described as gentle. In the past, concerned that Prince Jing was too unsociable, the emperor had tried sending many cats and dogs to his son in hope of providing him with a companion. But the prince never even spared them a single glance, never mind accepting one of them. At the time, the emperor thought the prince perhaps simply disliked pets. But now, for some reason, the prince, who didn't like pets, was making an exception for a fish of all things. Dazed, the emperor considered the different possibilities. After a while, and with great difficulty, he opened his mouth. "Do you mean to say that you've started taking care of this fish?" Mu Tianchi nodded slightly. Prince Jing had actually decided to raise a pet fish. The emperor was flabbergasted. It wasn't a bad thing, since this son of his seemed to be finally demonstrating some human feelings, but this fish... It wasn't even a precious, auspicious koi. It was just a little run-of-the-mill carp. It looked like the kind that was actually made into soup. Prince Jing's tastes sure were something. At this point, the emperor had already forgotten why he had summoned the prince. "A pet fish," he said, with a twitch of his lips, sounding a little forced. "Not bad." Li Yu watched Prince Jing nod and felt like a little pony had trotted proudly across his heart. Although Wang Gonggong and even Li Yu himself had long since accepted that he was Prince Jing's pet, this was the first time the prince was acknowledging it himself. Did the prince bring him here for the sole purpose of announcing Li Yu as his pet in front of the emperor? What a high-profile and distinguished pet he was! Li Yu was floating on cloud 9. The point of the main quest, priceless pet fish, was for him to become Prince Jing's pet fish, after all. And now the prince had straight up announced he was his pet in front of the emperor. Didn't that mean the main quest was complete? But there was no prompt congratulating him on completing a task. Apparently, a concession from Prince Jing wasn't enough for this stupid system. He still had to press on until he succeeded at getting along with the prince. A eunuch rushed in, announcing that the noble consort and the second prince were outside, requesting an audience. That was when the emperor remembered why he had summoned Prince Jing. He gave the prince a meaningful look, but he was so busy playing with his fish that he didn't react. The emperor sighed lightly. "Let them in." Chapter 8. The Fish is Angry. Li Yu was right next to Prince Jing. When he heard that the noble consort was coming, he wanted to take a look at her. Having already seen the emperor, who looked roughly the same as the description in the book, Li Yu also wanted to see what the woman who dared provoke a tyrant looked like. Except his current position was a little off to the side, and his view was blocked. Li Yu kept swimming back and forth, straining to peek, but to no avail. Just when he was about to give up and resort to eavesdropping, Prince Jing, who had been observing him for a while, moved the bowl so that it faced the entrance to the palace perfectly. Li Yu was startled. A coincidence? Did the prince somehow notice him trying to look at the noble consort? Prince Jing had demonstrated a considerable aptitude for pet fish care so far, but there was no way he could be this attentive, right? Perhaps he just felt like moving the bowl. No big deal. Li Yu quickly convinced himself not to get caught up in pointless speculation. Since he had a clear view now, he was going to look his fill. Before long, a graceful woman draped in imperial robes walked into view, surrounded by attendants and servants and leading a tall youth. Noble consort Chu's hair was heavy with pearls and jade. Crabapple blossoms in full bloom were embroidered around the hem of her light purple robes. With skin brighter than snow, she was beautiful beyond compare, and it was obvious the noble consort knew how to take care of herself. If it wasn't for the tall second prince trailing behind her with eyes that looked rather like hers, it would have been very difficult to discern that she was already at least 30. Li Yu sighed dreamily. It was no wonder such a beauty was the most favored concubine in recent years. According to the book, Noble Consort Chu was at the peak of her life at this point in the story. The emperor had already privately let her know that he planned on making her son the second prince, Mu Tianzhao, the crown prince. The emperor, like many emperors of the past, wished for his Di son to inherit the throne. Years ago, he had made his first son, Empress Xiaohui's son, the crown prince, only for the boy to tragically pass away at age 7. The emperor and empress grieved for years until Empress Xiaohui gave birth to the fourth prince. The emperor once again had thoughts of making him the crown prince, but unfortunately, the fourth prince was not blessed. He suffered a cold at 2 years old and unexpectedly passed away at an even younger age. One after another, Empress Xiaohui suffered the loss of her sons. Despite how fragile her health had become, she was determined to give birth to the fifth prince, Prince Jing, regardless of how reckless it might be. But the heavens decided to play a cruel joke on the emperor and empress, and both of them received a great shock when they realized the youngest Di son was born mute. After Empress Xiaohui passed away, the emperor felt his fate must not be aligned with his Di sons, so he never mentioned making anyone the crown prince again. But now, after 20 years, there was finally some movement from the emperor, and noble consort Xu could not be more ecstatic. Although the emperor's favor toward her son was as clear as day, he never showed any hint of granting her the title of empress. But so what? As long as her son, the second prince, was named crown prince and ascended the throne, it made no difference if she was empress or not. The noble consort thought her suffering had finally come to an end. She even seemed to walk with a spring in her step. Once Lady Chu had greeted the emperor along with the second prince, the emperor asked her to approach. As he intended to pronounce the second prince as the crown prince, he had to afford her this respect. The noble consort smiled daintily and sat down next to the emperor. She glanced down at Prince Jing, her expression victorious. So what if he was the son of the empress? So what if he was born more noble than her son, the second prince? Prince Jing would still need to bow his head to the crown prince, the future emperor. She and the second prince shared a knowing look, but Prince Jing didn't make any indication that he noticed. Prince Jing's gaze never strayed from the little carp. His finger was still submerged in the water, playing with the fish's smooth back every now and then. Li Yu was getting a little pissed off from all the touching. "Hey, you're being too rough. A fish can't take it." Li Yu evaded his hand, glaring fiercely at Prince Jing. When Prince Jing found his fingers fishless, his dark, unblinking stare lingered pointedly on the little carp. The temperature in the air around them suddenly plummeted. Was the tyrant angry because Li Yu wouldn't let him squeeze him? Fine, whatever. Good fish didn't fight with humans, especially not their owners. He knew Prince Jing was probably upset at the sight of noble consort Chu sitting next to the emperor. What child would be happy seeing another woman take his mother's place? Lady Chu was full of smiles, but her smile held an edge of provocation. She was clearly showing off. Prince Jing was obviously in a bad mood, Li Yu decided. He had a good reason for using him as a stress ball. He leaned back in, nuzzling against Prince Jing's finger, hoping to make him feel better. "I'll let you squeeze me, but don't be so rough, okay?" Prince Jing pursed his lips at the way his fish was clearly trying to please him and continued to squeeze the fish's back. Li Yu endured it in silence. If he felt that Prince Jing was truly being too rough and he couldn't take it anymore, he would dart to the side with a swing of his tail, but a little while later, he would always swim back, allowing Prince Jing to use him as an outlet for his anger. The little carp didn't seem to hate his touch, Prince Jing noted, but why did it keep shying away and then coming back? Was he handling the fish too harshly? He wondered. The prince's touch became gentler. Li Yu instantly felt better. Who knew having his back squeezed like this could feel this nice? It was even a little ticklish. Li Yu curled his tail around the prince's finger to show that he liked it. Prince Jing realized this little carp wasn't that hard to understand after all. Fish and human were absorbed in their own little world. They didn't care how they might look to anyone else. Having already seen Prince Jing like this, the emperor watched the prince with the little carp with rapt attention. He never knew his cold-hearted and distant son could play with a fish. Meanwhile, noble consort Chu's smile was frozen on her face. Prince Jing had managed to humiliate her without saying a single word. "What's the matter with Prince Jing?" she asked, trying to get the emperor to notice the prince's rudeness. There was a smile warming the emperor's face as he said, "Noble consort, Prince Jing has started caring for a fish recently. What do you think?" Of course, Lady Chu didn't think it was any good at all. She had come here with a goal, and she wasn't going to sit back and watch a drab gray fish disrupt her plans. If the emperor was acting like this, he must have forgotten what she told him earlier and was feeling soft toward Prince Jing. But the noble consort had come prepared. She tossed a glance to one of her trusted servants waiting on the side. The servant immediately left, then quickly returned with a snowy white ball in her arms. Lady Chu delightedly hugged the snowy white ball to her chest and smoothed its fur. She said gently, "Has the emperor forgotten about my Piao Xue after seeing Prince Jing's fish?" By now, the emperor had also remembered why he had summoned Prince Jing. He chuckled, rubbing his nose. The snowy white cat slowly raised its head and let out a meow. It was clearly conspiring with its owner. Li Yu, who had been playing with Prince Jing, heard the meow and was so alarmed that all his fins stood on end. Did Qianqing Palace also have a cat? Carefully, Li Yu swam to the surface of the water to see what was going on. And there it was, nestled in the noble consort's arms. The snow-white cat's sapphire eyes honed in on him immediately. That shape, that sound, wasn't that his greatest enemy? With a shudder, Li Yu immediately dove down to the bottom of the bowl. But it was too late. As soon as the large white cat laid eyes on him, it let out an excited yowl, scrambled out of the noble consort's arms, and shot toward him like an arrow. "Save me! The cat wants to eat fish!" He had thought that if he ever came face to face with his arch nemesis again, he'd be able to find some escape route, or if worst came to worst, he'd slap the fish in the face with his tail. It wasn't until he was in front of the cat for real that he realized its teeth had left a serious mark on his instincts. Just the memory of that bite was enough to make him tremble. Trapped in the bowl, Li Yu had nowhere to escape to, leaving him with no choice but to curl into a ball beneath Prince Jing's hand. He prayed the large white cat wouldn't see him, but he knew he was fooling himself. The cat wasted no time in pouncing, and it showed no fear of water as it opened its mouth to snap up the fish. Just as it seemed as though Li Yu was going to end up in the cat's mouth, Prince Jing held the curled-up little carp in his hand closer to him. The cat bit down on empty water. "Meow." Confused, the white cat looked up and saw a face that it would never forget. "Meow." Suddenly, the cat felt like all hope was lost. Prince Jing's face was as icy as frost. With a flick of his fingers, the white cat was flung off, barreling into the legs of the servant who had brought it. The servant let out a scream of pain. The impact left the white cat dizzy, but it managed to stand back up, shaking its head furiously. It abandoned any thought of catching the fish and rushed straight back into the noble consort's arms. From his hiding place under Prince Jing's hand, Li Yu peeked out from the gaps between the prince's fingers. Prince Jing was rolling with laughter. As expected of his tyrant master, the white cat got what it had coming again. Noble consort Xu was secretly delighted at seeing Prince Jing raise a hand right in front of the emperor. She bent down to pick up her white cat, which was still howling pitifully, and made a show of examining it. She pretended to be distressed as she scolded. Piao Xue, you terrible thing! Haven't you learned from last time? Why did you have to provoke Prince Jing? Do you not take me seriously? All of Li Yu's happiness evaporated at her words. He was so furious that if he'd had a foot, he would have stamped it. While the noble consort seemed to be reprimanding her cat, in reality, she was playing one of her little games. She was reminding the emperor that this wasn't the first time Prince Jing had taught her beloved pet a lesson and that he didn't treat her with the respect she deserved, as the noble consort and as his Shu mother. After Lady Chu spoke, of course the second prince, Mu Tianjiao, piped up in support. My brother, the fifth prince, is just being a little mischievous. He doesn't mean any harm. Royal father, mother, please don't blame him. Li Yu's eyes rolled back in his head. He blew out a huge bubble with a pop and turned his tail disdainfully toward the second prince. The second prince's voice was mild, but underneath that gentle veneer was a ruthless countenance, even more than the noble consort. While the noble consort played her little games, the second prince was practically accepting Prince Jing's guilt for him by saying he had no ill intentions, as though afraid the emperor couldn't reach that conclusion on his own. This evil cannon fodder! Despite knowing Prince Jing would eventually inherit the throne, and Mu Tianjiao and the noble consort would both meet grisly ends, Li Yu couldn't help but feel a little anxious. This mother-son duo was teaming up and taking advantage of the fact that Prince Jing couldn't speak, especially since Prince Jing didn't even have Wang Xi Gong with him this time. Prince Jing had saved him so many times now, Li Yu couldn't sit idly by and watch them bully him. But what could he, a fish stuck in a bowl, do to the noble consort and her son, who were like the sun, shining brightly in the middle of the sky? Li Yu was so indignant, his cheeks puffed up. He started to swim in frustrated circles in his bowl. The noble consort and her son's actions had the desired effect. The emperor's expression darkened as he remembered the noble consort's tearful complaint from earlier. Prince Jing, I heard you threw her cat on her birthday. Is that true? On the day of her birthday, the noble consort had gone crying to the emperor that Prince Jing had hurled her precious cat, Piao Xue. Now that he had witnessed Prince Jing's treatment of Piao Xue with his own 2 eyes, he was starting to believe noble consort Qiu. Not that the emperor had any affection for the cat, it was merely a pet. Who cared if Prince Jing wanted to hit or kill it? Privately, the emperor didn't think it was much of a concern. But the situation involved the noble consort who was, after all, Prince Jing's Shu mother. Behind her was the second prince, who was also the emperor's choice for crown prince. The emperor didn't want there to be any bad blood between Prince Jing and the future crown prince, which was why he had summoned Prince Jing in the first place. He wanted to get to the bottom of the situation and give the noble consort an explanation appropriate enough to appease her. But Prince Jing gave the noble consort a fleeting, cold glance and made no move to explain. He continued to play with his little carp, eyes lowered. For some reason, though, the little fish's cheeks were puffed out. It was especially obvious when noble consort Qiu spoke, almost as if he was angry. Prince Jing was rather amused. Could this fish see through the noble consort and her son's trickery too? All right, my lovely people. So we have reached the end of the readings of chapter 5 through 8 of this so far very entertaining Danmei series. So I just have a couple of bullet points that I want to talk about before we say goodbye to each other. The first thing is after it was revealed that he had his second quest, and then they were like, there's a time limit. I was like, oh shoot. And I was thinking, okay, so got it. Time limits on the main quest. First off, that's kind of scary when you think about it, because immediately you're like, okay, so if he doesn't complete it, what happens? But then right after I mentally asked myself that question, the moped system popped up and was basically telling, yeah, you're going to die. So even with that though, I was just wondering, like other games and stuff, what if there are, possibilities for extensions. Is the system just not mentioning that? And if there can be an extension if he doesn't complete a mission, what would the price be? So those are just a couple of questions running through my head concerning that. The other thing I wanted to talk about is Li Yu's theory on the king's feelings and actions toward Prince Jing. And I have to say that I agree. One of the things I definitely understand starting off is actually the complicated feelings that the king has for his son. I think, sure, there's a part of him that naturally loves him as a father would love their child, but there is also that part of him that knows, as they say, that Prince Jing is responsible, not really, for his mother's death, or for the king's wife's death. And so I definitely can understand why their relationship isn't close. But even with that, it's nice to see that he has still put certain things in place to take care of Prince Jing, to make sure that he is treated fairly and nicely and taken care of. So that's nice, because it would have been really sucky if his dad also sucked. I'm glad we don't have to deal with that tragic little thing, and hopefully we don't ever have to. Anyway, going to page 78, it had mentioned noble consort Chu's son as the D son. Actually there on the page it just says D son, but it is the second tone, D, which there's a little footnote there, but for those who aren't reading the book, not that I'll always do footnotes because I really don't, that means legitimate or like official son, just so you know, if you were wondering. And then the last thing I wanted to say is I just think it's so adorable that both Prince Jing and Li Yu are like questioning each other when they do certain things. Like whenever Prince Jing does something for Li Yu, he was like, can he tell that I need this, or like I want that, as he's actually pretty good at this fish taking care of thing. And then and then Prince Jing is like, is my little fish upset? Can he tell that she's scheming too? And I feel like that's happened on a couple of occasions, and it's just nice to see that. Oh, I almost forgot. There was one more thing. For his side quest that would give him 2 hours of human time, I want to know, first off, how that's going to happen. Like after he gets that ability, is he going to go to sleep and then wake up as a human? Where is he going to be? Is he going to be like beside the bowl? Is the system going to turn him into a human and he's in like Prince Jing's bed? Is he on the floor? Like how is that going to work out? Because it's not like he can just transform into a human inside of the fish tank. anyway, the luminous pearl that he has to get, I'm going to assume that that is on noble consort's Chu's headdress and all of that stuff. It has to be. Anyway, that is officially all. I will see you all next time. Well, Eineman, have a beautiful day, a beautiful night. Da da da.